So a fair while ago now, we got the first rumblings of news that Walt Disney Animated Studios was going to be following up Frozen 2 with an additional 2 sequels, the aptly named Frozen 3 and Frozen 4. Now, from a financial standpoint, it very much felt like these films were the most obvious pathway that Disney should be taking. Their more recent glory days of the 2010s, where the likes of Frozen, Frozen 2 and Zootopia raked in over $1 billion apiece, were now a long-forgotten memory. And since COVID, Disney's been staring down the barrel of financial failure, flop after flop after flop. Most recently, Strange World and Wish, which lost hundreds of millions of dollars back to back. So, bringing back some of the titans of the revival era just makes perfect sense. Double dipping into making it 2 connected films? It's genius! Like, yeah, I know that they've said, the story we want to tell, it can't be done in one film. Yeah, sure, mate, sure. I totally believe you. Just admit that you want a double $1 billion gross and we won't argue. But anyway, when it was first announced, I really wasn't sure what the heck they were going to actually be making the movie about. I felt like the first one was really fresh and exciting when it came out, but by the second one, I just don't think the quality of the story was really quite as good anymore. I'm not really sure there are legs to the concept whatsoever, but like I said, I knew the films would earn a lot of money, so ultimately, whether they were good or bad didn't matter. It's a business, I get it. But I couldn't help but feel that by the time all was said and done, there was going to be this feeling of the well having run dry on this particular franchise, at least under the current creative team. Just a feeling. I mean, realistically, how much further could they push this thing? And I was left to stew on that for another couple of months, until D23, the big Disney-centric con that they hold, because they have so much content to announce that they have to have their own little personalized Comic-Con. God, it's crazy how big Disney's gotten in the past 15 years or so, with all their studios and whatnot, gobbling up everybody. And as part of that conference, there was a panel segment where they talked about their upcoming slate of films, gave some story beats and discussion, and at that time for Frozen, they gave the spiel that the story had gotten away from them, and so to do it justice, they had to split it into 2 movies. And that's fine, it's complete BS, like I said, but it's fine, make the money, do what you gotta do. But there was something that jumped out at me from that discussion, and that is that Frozen 3 and I guess Frozen 4 are going to be tackling the big questions that you walk away from Frozen 2 with. And I'm not gonna lie, I was puzzled at first because I didn't realize I had any questions about the second film and where it left off, you know? With a lot of Disney films, I guess I've just gotten used to the happily ever after, hand-waving everything off, you get me? Do people dig deep into who the fairy godmother is from Cinderella and where she comes from? Or why Jiminy Cricket can talk and wear clothes? Or how the pirates, who are grown-ups, somehow even got to Neverland in the first place? And I mean, realistically, there are essays and essays of that kind of shit, but you know what I meant. These questions aren't enough to make me think, better make another film. They're simply added flavour. If there's big story threads you can follow, yes, sure. But otherwise, nah. And for me, I didn't really think at first there were any of these big story threads to tug on. I mean, sure, you could think up an idea for a third or fourth film, an original new tale, but they referred to these as unanswered questions. And so, luckily for us, I actually showcased a lot of these questions at D23 in that big presentation, which is exciting, I suppose. And so I figured, why not take a look at some of these questions? Some of which are pretty shallow, honestly, but some that can actually give us a bit of insight into what kind of story we're going to be dealing with over the course of the next 2 movies. Okay, so judging simply from the theme of a couple of these questions, I straight up think that it's clear that creators want to keep pushing into the mythology side of things, exploring the spiritual side of the world in which Frozen exists. We have questions such as, who gave Elsa her powers? Why doesn't Anna have powers? Was there a 5th spirit before? Why are there castle ruins throughout the, how do you say this one again? Ahtohallan? I don't know. I tried my best. Where do the nature spirits come from? Why are Elsa's powers still growing? Etc., etc. So evidently, a big part of the story of these movies is going to relate to the overall mystery of the spiritual world, Elsa's role within it, and where her powers came from. And obviously there's got to be more to the tale than just that, but this is going to form up a big chunk of it. But first, perhaps we should try to puzzle out some answers to some of these questions. Okay, so the origin of the nature spirits. I feel like that one should be obvious. They should always have been there. Ultimately, that is the point of nature spirits in almost all media ever. They come into existence when those natural features were formed on Earth, and then they just exist from there. Having them be man-made would be very lame. I like the idea of these spirits predating mankind. And at some point, maybe they gifted a portion of their power to form a 5th spirit, because I doubt there's always been a 5th spirit. They were probably created when humans moved in, started interacting with the spirit world. You know, I'm pretty sure the 5th spirit's meant to be the bridge between the natural and the human worlds. Where have I heard that before? So it makes sense that the Natholdra, is that how you say it? Northuldra, had members of their nation become empowered as the fifth spirit over the course of their history. As for the castle ruins, no idea. Maybe the Northuldra had a bigger civilization at one point, and then that led to a schism at some point, which led to Northuldra and Arendelle splitting off. Who knows? Maybe when that culture collapsed, they lost the fifth spirit. It's really unclear. You could go any direction, but I'd bet on something like this happening. But then there are questions that relate more specifically to Elsa. As for the origin of Elsa's powers, was it not explained in Frozen 2 that Elsa got her powers as a boon from nature, straight up, because her mum was compassionate and saved Elsa's dad? Was that not the story? Also, I suspect that by getting married and having a kid, if you go by the schism theory that I just presented before about the two civilizations that split off from one civilization, it would reunite that schism from the original culture, which restores the spirit that might have been lost. That fifth spirit that can guide humans when interacting with nature. Maybe? It's as good a guess as any, I suppose. As for why Anna doesn't have any powers, let me quote my boy Ramses.
Second born, second place.
Sorry kid, the spirit already empowered Elsa, no double dipping. After all, when she realizes that she's the spirit, she has to abdicate her throne anyway. She has bigger fish to fry by that point. And then finally, why her powers getting stronger? I guess because they are. Look, she's a nature spirit now. A demigod, pretty much. They're supposed to be damn strong. Is one of them not full on a cyclone? So I think it makes a lot of sense for her to be ridiculously overpowered and still growing. Honestly, this is Disney. Just make her insanely strong. Completely busted. In the end, it's not like it matters to the overall story, because has she ever actually used her powers to save the day truly? Not really. Both times she has used her powers to fix things are because Anna gave her the strength to do so. First by sacrificing herself against Hans, and then again when she breaks the dam, which unfreezes Elsa. And so this allows Elsa to undo the storm and freeze the flood, respectively. And so yeah, just make her strong. Let her do something really impressive in the climax of the film for once without needing her sister's help. While I did notice that a big chunk of the remaining questions were either fluff or were more human-based questions. What type of queen will Anna be? What happened to Hans? And big call, but I think Hans is going to be coming back for revenge. Ultimately, whilst I think the spiritual side of things is all well and good, and it's really interesting and mysterious to say the least, I do think there needs to be an element of human conflict within these stories. The first had Weselton, but especially had Hans and his plot to marry Anna and murder Elsa, thereby clearing a path to the throne for himself. And then also all of his devious actions after that. And then in the second one, there wasn't as much of an active human element, but a lot of the story has our heroes trying to reconcile Arendelle with Northuldra, but also needing to grapple with the legacy of their own grandfather, his cruelty, his treachery, and then the dam itself. So yeah, I feel like there needs to be some sort of human villain to spur along the spiritual growth. Maybe Hans gathers up his brothers and invades or something, I don't know. After all, he's going to hear Anna's the new queen. Maybe he thinks Elsa's dead and thus Arendelle's vulnerable without their ice queen. I don't know, just a thought. On top of that, the question remains, what type of queen will Anna be? I think unless they take her character in a really unexpected direction, surely we've already seen what type of queen she's going to end up as. A just, generous, and involved ruler. I mean, she already seemed to be a pillar of the community at the start of Frozen 2 when she was simply a princess. And so I see no reason why that should change things. She very much felt like the queen in spirit anyway, and that's probably why Elsa was so quick to pass the role to her. And from there we had a few questions that just felt more like filler fluff and fan service. Will Kristoff be a king? Nah, probs not. Probably go with the tried and tested prince. If that. Maybe Mr. Peasant doesn't even want to have a royal title. Do they want kids? I could see reasons for and against them ever wanting or having kids, but since Elsa to me reeks of child-free cool aunt, I do suspect they'll end up having a kid. Bonus point if they have an elemental power of some kind. There, I've just planted the seeds for Frozen 5, 6, 7, and 8. You're welcome, Disney. I'll await my check in the mail. And then there's just a bunch of questions that don't really matter in the end. Why is Olaf alive? Magic. There you go. How did Sven meet Kristoff? Guess he found him in the woods. There you go. Why is he so old? He's a magical reindeer in a world that has a talking snowman and a woman with magical ice powers. It ain't that deep. And so, yeah, not really much else to say beyond that. Those are the major questions that Disney posed that stood out to me. And now I just want to remind you that these have all been my opinions, and I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of my thoughts on how Frozen 3 and 4 are going to play out? Are you with me? Maybe you have some alternate thoughts or want to build off something I've said. I'm really curious of your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.